Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this week's Swart Talk. And I will just tell people at the very top of the show that there won't be a Swart Talk next week because I'm away at a family wedding. Thank you very much for joining us and giving us your time tonight. And I hope you'll find it an interesting and informative program. Thank you for going on. And I will say again, as always, don't forget to click the like button, the notification bell, whatever else is there on your preferred social media platforms. And if you're watching us on Catch Up, thank you for doing that as well. I'm delighted to be joined this week by Leah Levain from Jewish Voice for Labour and by Rob Sewell from Socialist Appeal. I say I'm delighted. I wish I didn't have to be joined by them this week. However, there is new development in the all-out war of the Labour Party on its members, and particularly its members on the left, which needs to be talked about. And we have one definite target of that war here with us tonight. And we have a representative of a likely future target, and certainly one that some right-wing MPs would love to see the back of in Jewish Voice for Labour. So, Rob, if it's okay, we will bring you in first, because we know that tomorrow the National Executive of the Labour Party is looking to make membership of Socialist Appeal, which has been a part of the party for, I think, about 3 decades. Is that right? Then, they're meeting tomorrow to agree, and nobody really doubts it's going to happen, that simply being you essentially is going to be illegal, and you will be automatically expelled from the Labour Party. So give us a bit of background about all that and how you found out about it, please.
Well, thanks, Steve. And it's a good opportunity to go into a bit more detail as to what's happening. As far as tomorrow is concerned, I heard as much as you through the newspapers and the media that they are planning to prescribe Socialist Appeal paper, and anybody seen selling it or being a supporter of it or even having a stall, I think, on a Saturday afternoon, will be automatically expelled from the party without any right of recall or any objection, really. So it's quite a blatant attack, and this is the background, really, of the last, what you could say, since 2015. We all know, you mentioned the question of the war. There's been a civil war going on in the Labour Party, and of course, the right wing were terrified after Corbyn's victory. They were shocked and horrified because the right wing has controlled the Labour Party more or less since its inception, and it just lost control of it. And as a result, it was panicking. Of course, they then went on the offensive and sabotaged Labour's campaign, stabbed Corbyn in the back repeatedly. They preferred a Tory government to a Labour government, all these things. I mean, they are a fifth column in the Labour Party when it comes to that. And, they represent, the interests of the establishment, the interests of big business, the interests of capitalism. And their role has always been to make the party safe for the capitalist system, for capitalism, And obviously Corbyn's victory upset the apple cart. And they were determined by any means, and they were prepared to adopt any means in order to discredit Corbyn and discredit the Corbyn movement. And obviously, in order to take back control, they couldn't possibly give up the Labour Party. It was such an important weapon for them, really. Mm-hmm. And therefore, they managed to turn the tables, as it were, after all this sabotage and undermining and the 2019 election, which after all was largely put down to Keir Starmer's position on Brexit as well, but that's another issue. And then they forced Corbyn to resign, and as a result, with this shock and confusion, Starmer steps in, says he's the unity candidate and continuation and so on and so forth. And of course, that's a load of baloney. And, when he started, he kicked out all the lefts in the shadow cabinet and proceeded to shift the party to the right under new management. And then, all the way along the line, the suspension of Jeremy Corbyn, which was quite incredible. Even Neil Kinnock didn't suspend Tony Benn, for instance. So this has gone quite far. But of course, I do recall Tony Blair's comments about 2 years ago saying, well, in order to take back the Labour Party, we'd have to get rid of 300,000 members. And that's the plan. And of course, they've managed now to get rid of about 100,000, I think, have left the party in demoralisation and disgust. And of course, these expulsions are part of the process, you know, of demoralising, of crushing or attempting to crush the left, silence the left, and you know, terrify people as well, I suppose, that they could be expelled and so on and so forth. So it's a regime, you know, of terror really against the membership. And if they can drive another 100, 200,000 out, well, all for the good. So this is where it's ended up really. And it's, you know, this is going to be a bit of a process, but they are determined. Unfortunately, they're more determined than the left were when they were in power. That's the tragedy of it, because the reason why we are here now in this mess is because the left, when they had the opportunity to basically clean up the Labour Party and make it a real socialist party with a real socialist leadership that had a real socialist programme, and that could have been done with open selection, you know, and give the ordinary rank and file members the right to decide who their representative it is. That's all it was. It's nothing really revolutionary in that. But of course, these people in Parliament were, you know, majority anyway, are careerists, are determined to hang on, jobs for life, and so on and so forth. And they represent a political tendency, which is capitalism, which they are defending to the bitter end. So, you know, this is where we're at. We should have dealt with it a long time ago, and unfortunately, it wasn't. So we're paying the consequences now, and this is the beginning, I think, of a witch hunt that's really going to take effect. Four organisations have been picked out. Well, there'll be another 40, you know, that's when they get their way, because it's weakness invites aggression, and they'll continue on this path until they think they've really settled scores. And if it means wrecking the Labour Party, well, so be it, as long as they can make sure the left never ever gets back into power ever again.
Yes, well, I mean, it's interesting you talk about, you know, Corbyn's time in power and what could have been done then, because, I mean, we saw shameless whining, essentially, from the Labour right all the time. Every time anything didn't go how they wanted, they were complaining that they were being victimised and picked on and targeted and persecuted and all the other stuff. And, of course, as soon as they get in the position to be the persecutors, they're exercising that with absolute lack of shame, essentially. And, you know, I mean, I'm certainly you know, I was never a subscriber to the nicer kind of politics. I was always of the mind that we should swing the axes as hard and as fast as possible, and make sure that, you know, this accusation that the left wasn't interested in winning elections was always the nonsense, because the right doesn't care about winning. They happily lose for the next 20 years because they don't give a stuff about people who are suffering, as long as they can consolidate their hold on the party. Speaking of the right, let me bring Leah in now. So, Leah, you were co-chair, is that right, of Jewish Voice for Labour? And Mr. Neil Coyle MP, the delightful Mr. Coyle, has been not only applauding the action that the party's planning against Socialist Appeal and other groups, but also then calling for, you know, the complete expulsion of every member of the, you know, left-wing Jewish group in the Labour Party. What do you have to say about that? And what have you got any messages for Mr. Coyle?
Well, Mr. Coyle has been reported apparently by several people for anti-Semitism, and has removed his tweet calling for us to be proscribed.
Is he taking it down now? It hadn't gone well.
Apparently he's taking it down. It's and believe me, there are several of our members in his borough, in the borough of Southwark, who are, and even in his constituency, who are pretty angry at the amount of time they put in campaigning for him, because it was more of a marginal. Because unlike some other organisations who may or may not remain nameless, depends where I want to go, Jewish Voice for Labour have always called for campaigning for your Labour candidate, even when we have strong disagreements with them. Other organisations have explicitly called for, well, they've certainly refused to campaign for candidates they don't agree with, and they have even advocated voting for other parties, and yet, like Alistair Campbell, and he's back in the party, no problem. And somehow it was an outrage to even consider suspending or expelling him. And yet comrades like Rob and others who, despite their disagreements with the leadership, have always been loyal to the party and never stood against them. And it's outrageous, to put it mildly. And I'm sure we'll get in some of well, we'd have to get into all the details, but the constitutional nonsense that they're quoting, there's nothing in the rule book that says you're not allowed to criticize. There's a thing about campaigning against or standing candidates against, which doesn't apply for 3 of the 4 organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And I suspect that with the 4th, which is Resist, which Chris Williamson set up after being expelled, i.e. they're already outside the party, is a bit bizarre. And I think they probably mean another organization, and that's how idiotic they are. But Jewish Voice for Labour, I think it would be a bit much in the heat of the long and ongoing debates, if that's the word, about anti-Semitism. I think it would make something of a mockery to expel root and branch left-wing Jews. Nonetheless, they are picking us off one by one. No one in my area can believe that I have never even received a reminder of conduct. But most, not all, but many of our committee and members have received such a letter or a warning or a suspension, and in a couple of cases, I'm not sure if there's any have actually yet been expelled, but certainly there's suspensions and so on at the top level. So that's the way they're doing it with us. Anyway, I've got lots more to say, but we have time, I think. So enough for
now. I will just point, I mean, we had a comment in there from Roger Herring, old mate of mine, and he's watching the program at the minute. And he says he's challenging my description of delightful. I assure you it was with a dripping with sarcasm, as the saying goes. But Roger made a comment earlier on which made me smile on Facebook in response to the trailer for tonight's program. And he said on Facebook, too many party members, including MPs, have tolerated the selective persecution of socialists and thereby emboldened this purge of entire groups. Sakir the abstainer has become the knight with the K of the long knives, which I thought was probably quite a good way to describe it. So well played with that, Roger. I'm going to put that up as a banner on the bottom there if people want to have their comment on that. Is Keir Starmer the knight of the long knives? Is he even that interesting? Is it is it other people in the party, his sidekick Mr. Evans, etc., who are driving this, who once said democracy in the party should be suppressed as far as possible or whatever? I can't remember the exact words. Doesn't seem to be a fan of Labour members generally. And feel free to jump in on that. But Rob, if we can come back to you just for 1 second. I mean, a lot of people might not have heard, people watching this program might not have heard of Socialist Appeal before Labour decided that they were intolerable and they want to get rid of them. So what does Socialist Appeal actually do in the party as it stands at the minute and has done then for quite a while?
Well, to be honest, it's a question of attempting to transform the party, isn't it? To make it a real weapon in the interest of the working class. I mean, when the party was first formed by the trade unions in 1900, well, the Marxists played a key role in that. The Social Democratic Federation, they were given 2 places on the executive, but they had a bit of a sectarian attitude, and they left after about 12 months because the party didn't adopt a bold socialist program. But on the basis of events, you had, the Russian Revolution and the war. You had Clause 4 being brought in. The party's socialist constitution based on common ownership of the means of production, distribution, exchange, which became the aim of the party. In other words, to overthrow do away with capitalism and bring about a socialist commonwealth based upon common ownership and so on for the working class. But of course, that was just stuck in the drawer then, because the right wing ruled the roost. And together with the trade union leaders as well, in the 1930s and 40s, the trade unions, unlike today, when many of them are on the left, I think they were very much, nearly all were on the right. So there was a real a kind of cabal of the right wing in the trade unions and the right wing in the Labour Party. And of course, they hounded anybody who dared to speak out, like Stafford Cripps or Nye Bevan. I mean, Nye Bevan's seen as the great hero, isn't he? Because he established the National Health Service, but you know, he considered himself a Marxist. He said his political training was in the ideas of Marxism, and that he wanted to see the Labour Party to overthrow capitalism, basically. And he was expelled. You know, he was expelled in 1938. He set up the health service, and in 2 years after that, they tried to expel him in 1951. They banned the Beverlites as a left-wing organization. So this civil war is not a new one, I would say. It's been going on probably since the inception of the party, because, I mean, when the party was first created, the ruling class tried to crush the Labour Party. As you probably know, they refused the trade unions to give any assistance, financial help to the Labour Party. They tried to strangle it at birth. But when they failed in that, they thought, the next thing is, let's take it over. You know, that's the best thing. Let's take it over. And that's what they did very successfully. You know, with the help of the right wing, the trade unions, they did that. But it was still based on the trade unions, still based on the working class. And that was the problem, if you like, you know, from the point of view of the ruling class. And they tried, as long as that was kept in their own hands, then they could render it, if you like, safe. And that happened all the way up, if you like, until I would say, 2015. Although you did have Tony Benn, you know, I remember well, and Bennism, and the left was a huge industrial wave in the 1970s, and the huge class struggle in the 70s reflected itself in the Labour Party with the growth of Bennism, of Tony Benn. And I mean, the NEC of the Labour Party came forward with the need for nationalisation of the top 25 monopolies, you know, and it was a very radical moment, but they still held on, and they are determined to hold on in the most ruthless fashion. But the left could have overturned it. That's the tragedy of it all, you know. That and of course, Socialist Appeal's, if you like, role, I believe, is to try and point this out and offer a clear. Don't mess about. You know, we had enough of bluffing the public. You know, and you know, we have to say what's the truth. You know, that the right wing in the Labour Party are agents of capitalism. You know, they do the business of capitalism. They're backed by capitalism. And unfortunately, the left was saying, oh, we have to have unity with these people. We've got to unite, you know, let's get together. You know, we've got more than, you know, that unite us. And I mean, what a load of baloney, you know. They should have said, you know, the rank and file of this party is the party, the real interests. They should decide. The conference is and they should have put it in their hand. Unfortunately, as we know, it didn't happen. And I say that the left leaders made a big blunder. And we're paying for it now. And Socialist Appeal pointed out we need to carry through deselection, you know, automatic reselection, the democratic demand. And yes, we should, you know, we should fight for socialist policies. And which, going back to the root, what the hell's the Labour Party being created for? Is it to plan capitalism, you know, or is it to change society in the interest of working people? And that's therefore. Socialist Appeal has been hammering away, you know. Yes, we provide a Marxist analysis of a class society, of the character of capitalism, which has profound implications. But, you know, what does people want? They did not want the earth. All they want is a decent job, a decent education, a decent house to live in. And yet capitalism can't even provide that. And unless you get your head around that, then, and you know, you understand that, then obviously you're going to try and make compromises, which we don't tell. That's the point. We just tell it as it is. And we're a bit of a thorn in the side then, you know, because we try to get clause 4 back. And, you know, there was ditched by Tony Benn. Was it Tony Benn? By Tony Blair, sorry. Who wrote Tony Benn? Tony Blair in 1995. You know, the big movement, you know, the militant movement and getting rid of clause 4. And basically, you know, we put forward, let's bring it back. And there was 62% of the membership of the delegates at Labour Party conference in 2018 voted to bring it back, against the actual pleas of the platform. So it shows the potential that was there, but it slipped through our fingers, because at the end of the day, the left leaders controlled the situation. It was in their power to do something, and instead of doing it, they kind of retreated. And you know, weakness, you know, invites aggression, I'm afraid, and that's what happened. The right wing were emboldened, and every retreat, the right wing are emboldened, you know, and more scandalous. You mean, look at the report, this Ford report. They're not. I mean, you wouldn't believe it, the things that they got up to, and yet we're being expelled. I'm sure I'll get a letter now tomorrow morning. You know, saying I'm out. And these people have allowed into the party were fifth columnists in the party. In reality, sabotaged and stabbed us in the movement in the back. and yet they've invited Burko and Tories back in and welcome into the party and get rid of the socialists. That tells you everything you want to know about the Starmer Labour Party and the direction it is going. So I sympathise with Leah about whether
it does. I mean, in terms, I mean, my personal take on the thing is that the biggest shock for the Labour right wasn't that Jeremy Corbyn got the leadership, although that was certainly a shock for them. It was that 2017 proved that what he stood for was very popular. I'm just scrabbling here looking for my computer charger because apparently I'm not plugged in. But it's that shock for them just meant that they you could see the stunned look on their faces, and then whatever they planned to do then, I think in 2017, if it had been a bad result, would have been very similar to what we're seeing now. But they just decided to redouble their plans and go even harder in.
Can I respond? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
can I respond to some of Rob's points? Just a correction. The Ford report is still not published, so you're confusing it with the leaked report. So the Ford report is the long-awaited and probably never to appear inquiry into the leaked report. And it's certainly something that Jewish Voice for Labour have been working on in great detail. And it's just stuck. So that's one thing. I only slightly want to take issue with Rob about Labour, the left being in control when Jeremy Corbyn was elected. I think the left was never in control. Yeah. And I think one of our errors, and not only, but particularly for this big wave of newer people who came in full of hope and enthusiasm and excitement, and actually the killing off of that hope, not only, but particularly for young people, I think is one of the wickedest things that the right wing of the Labour Party has done. Truly wicked. But there was an expectation that having got a left leader, that was job done. And all we needed to do was sort of support the left leader. And I'm not sure, I mean, huge respect for Jeremy, and I can barely begin to imagine the pressure that he was under. But I'm not sure where he was getting his advice from. Because, and I'm a nice person, and there's an icky end of nice that means you don't, you allow, which is what happened, to happen. But the left was never in control. The left leader, and this was why everyone got confused, because they didn't understand that because you elect a leader of the party from one faction, that actually the amount of control that the Parliamentary Labour Party had at one level, but particularly the bureaucracy at the other. And probably Blair did a fantastic job. He was the one who and he had enough support, and he was there long enough to actually reorganize it in his image, root and branch. And that's where we still are. Certainly when we come to a lot of the regional offices, they are still sort of progress type, Labour first type. So I think that there was, I totally accept the failure of the left to really get particularly newer members to understand how ruthless you need to be. Not ruthless, but just determined and not compromising, and really, really getting how low they would be prepared to go, which, as you were saying, Rob, was very much outlined in the leaked report. Let's assume 10% of it was true. 10% of it would be enough to demonstrate how much it will undermine, and that was hidden. Now, of course, the leadership should have done more, the membership should have done more, but it is the whole thing about what is the ruling class. It's in control of the bureaucracy of the Labour Party, it's in control of the media. I mean, it's, there's been books written, Bad News for Labour, the Glasgow group that write extensively, Greg Philo and other people, about basically how the media behave. And while we've had social media, which has been fantastic for many things, in some ways, because of the way the algorithms work, it keeps us in our bubble, and we don't necessarily hear enough about what the genuinely bewildered people are saying. And we've not been helped by COVID and not being able to be on the streets and persuading people in the same ways. But yeah, with lessons to learn, of course. But as Rob was saying, so, you know, I'm not taking big disagreements with you, Rob, but some of us older people, longer in the tooth, really do know that. And many younger people as well understand about the power of the ruling class. And some things are very shocking, not getting through mandatory reselection. I mean, it's, you know, I was a councillor for a while. It's mandatory reselection. I mean, custom and practice is that you tend to get reselected, but it's not automatic. You do actually have to put yourself through a selection process every single time. You know, I would go further and say that members should have the right to sack people. The constituents should have the right to sack people after a period of time. You know, I think the Chartists were calling for annual elections, heaven forfend, but I think that long ago, you know, more than 200 years ago, they were calling for annual elections and not these jobs for life things. It's anyway. You may have another question for me. That was what I wanted to say in response to the excellent contribution from Rob.
Yes, well, I mean, I did have a question, but we'll come back to that in a minute as long as I don't forget. But you know, I think it's interesting that you mentioned the social media, because, you know, it's not called the struggle for nothing, I think is the saying that applies in this instance. You know, it is going to be an ongoing struggle, because the people who have their fingers in the tills and have their hands on the levers of power are never going to remove those and give them up without a fight. So you've got to be prepared to dig in. And, you know, I mean, we saw with the social media that you mentioned that, you know, there was a massive impact in 2017 on the social media, and immediately all the social media platforms started finding excuses to change their algorithms, logarithms, whatever the hell you call them, to start trying to limit the reach. And you had to then start trying to find ways to bypass the new restrictions that they were putting in, etc. So, you know, these corporate platforms certainly have no interest in helping people find out what's really going on and facilitating any kind of meaningful change in the system, because they're quite happy with the way it is. The Labour right, they'll be quite happy having, you know, probably having 100 MPs and being essentially meaningless in Parliament, as long as they have control of the Labour right and it doesn't challenge their interest, of the Labour Party, and doesn't challenge their interest. So, you know, but where people want to fight, I mean, the one thing, and it's coming up quite a bit in the comments on here as well, is that, you know, a lot of people now are starting to think that the Labour Party is a busted flush. It's not going to ever get back to being you know, a meaningful vehicle for change for the better for the people who need it. And people are very much pushing the idea that you've got to then go on to some other vehicle to do that. So, you know, do you guys think, Rob, as somebody whose party membership may not last very much longer, and Leah as somebody who's certainly in the crosshairs of a lot of the Labour right, you know, is their life in the party yet? Is it worth fighting for? Is it something that people should kind of give up on and move on to extra parliamentary activity, non-party activity, or a new party, etc.? Or should they dig in and refuse to give in and refuse to concede the field to the you know, to the frankly shitty people who are, you know, have seized control of it at the moment?
Well, in my opinion, I don't think you should give it up. Why should we? You know, with these people who've taken it over, who are abusing it, as far as I'm concerned, there is you have the potential to change the lot if the trade union leaders were prepared to come on board. Like, you know, Leah mentioned the question of, you know, open selection and so on. Look, 90% of the constituency party rank and file wanted it, right? There was, you know, the Labour Party had been flooded. 300,000 new people joined the party, and they were raring to go. And if you like, they're on the leash, waiting for the sign, waiting for the word to go. And they didn't get it. All they got was, hang on, you know, don't rock the boat. Look, our Commons were moving resolutions, and we were being rung up by Labour headquarters on behalf of the, you know, Corbyn office. Please withdraw the resolution. Please withdraw the resolution on clause 4 or no. And also, honestly, it was rather than say go for it, you know, and oh no, it was a wet blanket, to be honest with you, and that's the problem. If you can rile people up, and there was hundreds of thousands who were enthusiastic, waiting for it, and you put a damper on that, you know. And well, look, But Corbyn was first a challenge, wasn't he? No vote, no confidence within 9 months, wasn't it, or 7 months, something like that. Then you had the chicken coup. Why didn't he get up and say, "All right, then I'll stand for election, but you all of you are going to do it as well, then." You know, every one of you is going to stand for re-selection in your constituencies. You know, he should have turned it on him. And I tell you, the rank and file would have gone ballistic. They would have said, absolutely right, because they knew that Corbyn was being stitched up and stabbed in the back, and they would have rallied as they out. I mean, they rallied and rallied and rallied. How much more can you give them? You know, but then they just got let down and let down and let down, and not. And obviously, you know, some good things were done. Or what I meant by control is the control was in the hands of the rank and file. They could have sorted it out. They had the ability to move. But of course, you need also the trade union leaders to cooperate as well. And they were supposed to be on the left, after all. So just on that particular point, that it needs to be underlined that, you know, this wasn't a sort of automatic thing that we're going to be where we're at because we didn't think we had control. The potential, the ruling class has lost control. The PLP, yes, but they were a tiny handful. How many members are in the PLP? Is it, was it 200 to 300 members, full stop? There were 500,000 out there. If there was mobilised, they could have done the business. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, the Labour Party's not going to go away, whether we like it or not. Obviously, the struggle's not going to go away, whether we like it or not. I mean, we've got the deepest crisis of capitalism for 300 years, according to the Bank of England. We got a budget deficit. God, I think they spent 350 billion. They're going to make cuts. They're going to be austerity. If they delayed it, then delayed it. But by God, there's going to be some attacks on the working class. And of course, the unions will be first and foremost to resist this attack. But I think that this is going to spill back over into the Labour Party. The reason why these people, they say, "Oh, we're going to patch," you know, they're living in the past. You know, capitalism in the past, yes, offered reforms in the 1950s. You know, my parents got a council house, you know, and our living standards went up, and my father had a job, and there was nothing. But now we've got an organic crisis of the system. So, you know, there's no way to hide, and there'll be a lot of people searching. It's true, probably through the unions first of all, I would say. But I think the Labour Party's not going to be immune from this struggle. And I think the left will rise again. I don't say I think, I believe, because there's no alternative. If there was an alternative, fine. But I've heard it so many times. But the political expression is the Labour Party. It can be rotten, and the Blair was rotten, wasn't it? Well, look what happened with Corbyn. It showed the potential. Of course, they'll try and hold the line now, but the class struggle will go on. You know, whether we like it or not, and it's going to get more and more heated, I think. So the idea of the trade unions will fight, yes, but trade union struggles can't solve everything. It's got to be a political struggle, because at the end of the day, it's the system that's at fault, you know, and therefore the political question is vital. So political representation will be key, and if the unions are worth its salt, they'll have to take the battle once again into the Labour Party. So I think there'll be another rise, if you like, of the left, and I think it'll probably be more steeled, you know, but I can understand why people are leaving now. Don't get me wrong, you know, everybody's cheesed off by the way things are gone. But and you know what we're trying to do is to at least hold the line. And you know, Socialist Appeal is not just in the Labour Party, but in the unions, amongst young people. We want to build a force that's capable of, when the next wave comes, we can have a decisive influence and say, let's have a bit of backbone here. Let's carry it through to the end. Let's not make the mistakes we had in the past. And I think that's the key thing is learning the lessons of what we had, so we can prepare for the coming period. But it's going to be a hell of, I think, you know, there'll be expulsions. There's going to be a dark days in the Labour Party, that's for sure. But there's going to be, I think, there's anger in society. It's got to have some reflection somewhere. And I think the trade unions will be the first focal point. But I think, trade unions in and of itself won't solve it. It'll have to come back to the political ground. And I think there'll be a far more radical movement in the future, because the crisis will be even deeper. So I think that the ideas, as I said, of Marxism will be more relevant today and tomorrow than they ever have been. And the idea of changing society will grip the minds of many, many people if their backs against the wall. So yeah, you know, it's sometimes there are difficult moments, and you know, we have to fight the fight where it is, but we also have to have a perspective, I think, of things. That's all I'd like to say.
Goodness, we've lost Steve. That's okay.
I've knocked him into the stratosphere.
Well, I think we're still here. So
carry on, Nick. Carry on.
Assuming so we're still here. So for me, Yeah, I think it is. I mean, the point about the crisis of capitalism that you were making is very, very important. One of the things I find particularly infuriating when people defend capitalism as opposed to a planned economy and socialism is the fact that the capitalism in this country is largely dependent on the state. You know, why are we privatizing all our public services? You know, if you've got capitalists taking their risks and, you know, all they're supposed to get all their rewards for being entrepreneurial and taking risks and risking their own homes and whatever, they're not doing any of that. They're just running our services for us and raking off profits. Some of the things that are happening in schools are absolutely horrendous because the people are getting forgotten are the students. The staff are getting forgotten. The students are forgotten, and meanwhile, the academy chains and the private healthcare companies are making loads and loads of profits. So that's not even entrepreneurial. What's happened? We've now lost Rob.
Sorry, mate. Yeah, I got kicked off some kind of.
That's okay. We carried on. We're fine.
I guess you would. I was talking.
We're in control.
Yeah, we're in control. The left's taking control. There you go. But you know, and I really welcome your optimism. But it's going to be very very worrying times ahead. I agree with you that we must definitely not give up without a big fight in the Labour Party. It's not theirs to take. It's ours to keep. And certainly, I don't think many JVL activists are walking out with saying, you know, you're going to have to pick us off or take us out because it is our party. And maybe I'm lucky. I've got a relatively left-wing CLP, and I've seen what's happened in other areas. I also think it's important that activists continue to be active, but also work out where their energy is best spent. And for many people, it's keeping the Labour Party membership, but actually being more active outside where they can make, you know, because there's no point in burning yourself out. I mean, Rob has managed to keep going for all these years. Myself nearly as long, but not always in the Labour Party. And but you have to balance things out. And there's huge movements that tend to be around single issues, but through those things, the climate, most obviously, the movements against racism, there's the potential to raise all those sorts of issues that Rob has outlined, and I certainly don't need to repeat. The worry is if we fail, that we really are in a situation where the far right could rise. You know, we have a government that is absolutely giving succor to the ideas of the far right, the treatment of asylum seekers. And I've seen some awful things just today on Facebook in our local refugee support group that someone posted this positive stuff about the Royal National Lifeboat Institutions. There's a revolutionary organization for you, saying, of course, we're going to carry on picking up refugees if they're in trouble in the sea. Just whatever Priti Patel says, we exist to rescue. We make no judgments about who's in danger. We rescue them. And some of the vile abuse that has then come, a lot of support as well. You always have to balance these things. But my worry is that there is this potential, if the left is crushed, even temporarily, it will be temporarily, that there could be a rise of the far right. I think it's that crucial. Some of the ideas that have become normalized, and I think it is, you know, I don't want to get hysterical about it, because it's also the fact that, you know, for example, around the nonsense of the appalling racist comments that were made about the 3 young men who failed to score the penalties. That was a phenomenal outpouring. And more than condemning the racism was actually getting the hypocrisy of Johnson and Patel in them condemning it and getting. So that's the sorts of things that we can and must build on and make those connections with, in whose interest is that racism. It's not in the interests of the working class. The very idea of talking about the white working class like it's a separate entity from the working class that includes Black, Gypsy, Roma, Traveller, Asian, Muslim, etc., people, is all part of trying to divide us. And they're very good at it. and it's divide and rule. It divides socialists, very left-wing socialists from centrists. We'll divide Jews from anyone who supports Palestinians, and we'll pretend that's not happening. There's fault lines all the way, and we have to be around to point out what's happening and to campaign about it. So all of that is really crucial. I don't know how long this actually goes on for. I should have asked that question at the beginning.
We've got about another 20 minutes, but if we finish soon, fine.
But I am going to keep pushing. Sorry, Steve, I'm totally pushing. I do need to push. There is a petition. I mean, petitions don't make a big difference, but there is a petition opposing the prescribing of Socialist Appeal and all the organisations. It's going across. Thank you very much, Steve. Please don't forget to sign the petition. The NEC is not balanced, and we suspect that it will go through. But it's part of the fight. But this is literally the least you can do. Sign the petition, share the petition, get it signed, so that the left-wing comrades on the NEC who are determined to oppose this can actually say how many people also oppose it, particularly Labour Party members. So thank you for putting that link across the bottom.
That's all right.
And welcome back. You missed the real gems, Steve. Yeah.
I feel like I missed out, but I'll have to try and watch it on catch up now because I got kicked off briefly, which is weird. Roger, again, the left should heed the words of Mick Mackay. They'll stop chasing when you stop running. I'll tell you what, Roger's on fire tonight. I think we need to give him a shot.
Have you ever read Ursula Le Guin, the Wizard of Earthsea? Because it sounds like that. You stop running, but you turn around the witch and face the monster. That's what we have to do.
This is the problem. I mean, with a lot of the right wing's attacks under the Corbyn era, I know that a lot of people were pleading with him and his team not to give an inch with all the various smears that were going on, because it was always going to be, they weren't doing it in. Well, I won't go there, but there were a lot of cases, I think, where giving the first inch just meant they were going to want to take a mile after that, and the Labour right had one aim and one aim only, essentially, which was end Corbyn, and that was they were prepared to burn everything down in the process. So there's a petition running down the bottom at the moment. There's also a protest, as I understand it, tomorrow, I think at 12 o'clock. Is that right? At Labour's Southside office in London, and again, people who are free to attend that and safe to do so, then please also join in on that. I mean, it is just this lesson, I think, of when you have an opportunity, don't waste it. And
can I just make one point, because obviously I don't think you should get too far carried away. The idea there's a shift to the right. I understand there's obviously pockets of racism and so on, but the mood amongst the mass, I think, is not that way. And amongst young people in particular, it's more radical actually than ever before. And even in the unions, I mean, we haven't commented. I know we're looking at the dark side of things. Look at this fantastic result in Unison, all right? Where the left has won the leadership of Unison for the first time in 20 years. And Unison was one of the props of the right wing in the Labour Party. And I think this is going to be a bit of a sea change. That's the whole point. And it's a barometer of how things can quickly change. We're not in a period of stagnation here or boom for capitalism where everybody's happy and everybody's hunky-dory. People are got their backs at the wall. People are extremely worried. Even at work, they're stressed out and so on. The future of the kids is in doubt. All these things are a real problem for people, and it's churning up people's consciousness, and they're looking for a way out. Unfortunately, because the Starmer has no answer for this. That's for quite fly a few Union Jacks and talk about British industry and so on. It's not going to way to do it. But of course, this idea of alternative of socialism can be very, very attractive to layers of society who are desperately looking for a way out. Look at that young woman who was forced to give birth in a toilet because she didn't want to, or was afraid to lose a shift because she was going to be sacked. I mean, the conditions in many areas in Britain and so on are bloody horrendous, really. And of course, we have to tap it. The unions have to tap into it. And just this point about where you go. Well, obviously, look, if we are all kicked out of the Labour Party tomorrow or the next few weeks, which is entirely possible with this list of 3,000 already chosen, then obviously we need to get together. There's many people, there's 100,000 who left the Labour Party already. There'll be people who are going to leave in droves after this, I'll tell you that now. And therefore, we have to get together. I would appeal to you, pretty young people, to get together with Socialist Appeal, to build for the future. Not only in the unions, amongst young people, but yes, when the crest of the wave comes again, and it will come, because of the conditions will emerge, that we can be at the right place at the right time. Let this not be a wasted opportunity, We've gone through the mistakes. All right, we've had the good days, but now we've made the mistakes and the blunders, and we're paying the cost for them. But if we learn the lesson, and the only lesson is we have to go all the way next time. We don't mess about next time. When we have the opportunity, we take it and not be blundered around with, unity, and all the rest of it, which was a real dampener on the whole situation. So I would appeal, yes, to join the Socialist Appeal, join this, help us. We're going to be prescribed. They're going to try and stop us selling the paper. Take out a subscription. Give us a hand. Why let them buggers get away with it? That's all I say. You help us in that regard. You help us, we'll help you. And that's the way to do it, to unify outside the party and inside the party. To join up with UVL. If you're still in the party, if you're still JVL, if you're still in the party, we'll be with you. But outside also. I don't care. They're not going to separate us from working people, whatever they fight. I think that's the way we have to do it. So we're not going out with a whimper. On the contrary, it's going to be a bang, and it's going to bang. It's going to be, they can hear it in their ears for a long time, and we'll be back. Yeah, I think your Spartacus said that, didn't he? He said, yeah, we'll be back, and there'll be millions. Well, by Christ, I'm telling you, let the right wing smirk, let the right wing have a grin. They'll be grinning at the other side of their face in the future, because they will also be doomed. Not because history won't allow it, because of the crisis itself. They're in a blind alley. So that's why I'm optimistic. If capitalism could deliver all the goods, I think I'll be down the pub now. Although I have to be social distancing, but it will be a lost cause. But capitalism does not deliver the goods. It's taking everything away. All the reforms that we've won in the past have been whittled away left, right, and centre. I agree with Leah, and she says, look at the billions of pounds handed to the railway companies, and the other corporations and the pharmaceuticals, and they bleeding us dry. There's a lot of anger out there. We got to tap into it and give it a socialist direction, because that's the only way. You can't patch up this diseased capitalist system. There has to be an alternative, and that's what we're fighting for. I think that's what the ranks of the Labour Party should be fighting for. Not to patch things up, to transform. Then people will rally to the cause. They rally to something. Because look at the last election, just as a last point, the Tory vote only went up by 300,000 votes compared to the previous election. It's the Labour vote that collapsed. People didn't come out to vote. They abstained. They just left. They can be won back, but you can only win them back by a bold socialist program that says, we are going to do something for you. And we don't just talk about it, we will do it. And I think, despite my passion, they can be convinced of that, I think. And yes, I didn't come into this movement just for myself or my self-interest. I came in for working people. I come from the working class. I am from the working class. And as long as they're exploited and downtrodden, I'll fight for their interests. And I believe in them, actually. I do believe in them, because I think they can change and will change on the basis of events, and they will rise to the occasion that of the need to change society.
I mean, it was always really hard to follow that, because your passion is always amazing, Rob, and your optimism is phenomenal. And I don't disagree with you. I think that there is a lot of work to do, and we have to, on the left, we have to think of the unions are hugely important. But of course, the working environment has changed so dramatically. We don't have the large factories and, the mines and villages, all very, very connected and so dependent on one industry, so that an attack on one, everybody feels it. But that doesn't mean that we can't organize. We've seen fantastic things. The migrant workers, they're not international workers of the world. That's a different group, but they're around. There's some wonderful group that, when the unions were not doing very much about it, were organizing migrant workers. So we need much, much more of that, organizing for the different situations that we're in. The community organizing, that's some of it started under Corbyn, which of course has been left, but we can organize in that way. I think there was, too much reliance on, there's this idea that, oh, well, until we get into power, we can't change anything. So the thing is to get into power. And it's sort of course, we want to be in power, but Labour's never been in power. Labour's have sometimes been in office, and it's a big difference. And it's like the way to get in power is to actually really, really spell out what's happening, not just, oh, we don't like this money going, the 17 billion going to a useless test and tracing, but the whole thrust. And Labour has not opposed that strongly enough. And in fact, Labour, particularly but not only under Blair, was largely responsible for it, for the academisation, for elements of privatisation, the private finance initiative, which we will be paying for goodness knows how long, expanded exponentially. And it's pointing those things out. And if making those criticisms, you don't even have to be a left-winger. I've made those points in a workplace environment that it just doesn't add up, private finance, the private finance initiative. So actually saying these things don't work even on the basis of a capitalist society. It doesn't work. And what has to happen is we have to be really, really bold. We need a leadership that's going to actually talk about how things are run, who's pulling the strings, and not pretend to people, because they're not children, that vote us in and everything will be solved. Even if we had left-wingers, even if we got a left-wing government under Corbyn, do we think that would have been the end of it and everything would have been solved? Absolutely not. The ruling class would have gone even more into overdrive. So unless we're educating people, of course it would be better. Probably even a Starmer-led government would be better than this one. Well, that isn't much of a, it's not much of a benchmark, is it? But if we're really going to change things, if we're really going to not have people giving birth in the toilet because they're scared, or, you don't have to go as far as going to the giving birth, but going to the toilet in their cabs because they can't dare miss a delivery, be late for a delivery. All of those things, the 0 hours contracts, the minimum wage, which isn't a minimum wage. We haven't had a minimum wage that long, but apparently in America, where they have had a minimum wage, after the war, a minimum wage would pay you enough for in that structure of the time, for a man on minimum wage, full-time minimum wage, could keep himself, a wife and a child and live a modest but an okay life as a basic starting point. Minimum wage doesn't touch the sides now. Even if they've changed the title and call it a living wage, it's nowhere near, even for a single person. So yeah, but at the moment the answers are not being given as to what the solution. People say to me so often, I don't know if you get this, Rob, or so often, oh, why do you bother? There's nothing we can do about it. And I stop, banging my head, trying not to be too angry with them and explain that what we can do, because quote unquote, we are many, they are few. So we have to keep going, and we have to keep. When nothing's going down without a fight. And, Rob will be likely kicked out tomorrow or Wednesday, and you might take a rest for a day while you think about it. And Rob will be fighting back on Thursday. I can guarantee it. And if it happens to any of us, that's what we would. You don't even take 24 hours.
I want to just kind of look at, because it got touched on slightly, I think, when Rob was talking. He said about, I'll be down the pub, subject to kind of social distancing, etc. But for a lot of people, so much of their time and identity for years even has been invested in their activities within the party, their activities on behalf of the party, their campaigning, the street stories, all that other stuff. That it can be a massive psychological blow to people to suddenly find themselves on the outside of that, for the vast, in the vast majority of cases, for no fault of their own, purely because the Labour Party has decided, or the certain faction within the Labour Party has decided, that it suits them to have these people not there anymore. And it's, the Labour sends people suspension letters or expulsion letters with a paragraph at the bottom saying, if you're finding this tough, if you need help with this, go and speak to your GP or the Samaritans. And I mean, I want to effing swear every time I see one of those things, because it's just this complete disregard and callousness towards people's emotional and mental well-being that happens in a lot of these cases. And this is, to me, that typifies the absolute, sociopathy really of the Labour right, that they really don't give a shit about people.
Can I say two things on that? The court case was lost. The High Court 8 lost, but there were some gains. And we know in the process of getting, it was going to be a High Court 13, and they quietly let 5 of them back in. And there were others. Another gain was that the judge did say that the part of that letter that says you must not speak to anybody, you must retain confidentiality, and therefore if you need to speak to anyone, you can speak to your GP or the Samaritans. Basically said you can speak about your own situation. Obviously, you can't break confidentiality on anyone else's data, but on your own, you can. Now, I do know that letters are still coming out since that court judgment without that change. So that is one thing to be aware of. Another thing I think is a really, really important point that you made. For some people, the party is a huge part of their life. Enormous part of their life, and it's a huge loss. And one of the other organizations that's in the fire is Labour in Exile Network, which is a bit ironic because this is for the people who've already been expelled or suspended. And it is nonsense. But if people do find themselves in that situation, that is a sort of home. It is like a shadow trying to organize, to look at policies, look at issues, and look at the injustices that are going on. But yet it is really important. The lack of, the weird thing that the court case has highlighted is this idea that the law treats the Labour Party as if it's a private tennis club rather than a mass political organisation. The trade unions, there's all sorts of laws about how the trade unions have to treat their members, and yet there are none for the Labour Party because they literally say it's a private association. And therefore, our only real relationship is a contractual one. So unless they've broken the contract with us, or we have, i.e. we've broken the rules, there isn't really much redress in law. Now, of course, law is only one tactical approach to the fight, and the political fight is the most important. But this has been part of it. But it's Anyway, I just offer that up. The lack of a duty of care to its own members is astonishing, and we've got to finish it. Otherwise, the whole thing about anti-Semitism and how non-members who are often not even supporters of the party have been allowed to dictate what is and what isn't anti-Semitism, such that Neil Coyle can get away, probably, and certainly others, with effectively saying we don't belong in the party, and others have got away with saying that we are not really Jews, which is
the Labour right is racist, is Islamophobic, is hideous towards Gypsy Roma traveller people, and has been in the very recent past. They don't like Jewish people who don't agree with them. They are essentially the epitome of everything that anti-racists despise, and that is hard truth. But as far as I'm concerned, that's how it is. We're right at the end of the show, so I'm going to try and wind it up there. But I would just say on that note, though, if you hear of people who have been treated by the Labour Party like this, either now or in the future, make sure, if you're watching this and you care about solidarity, you make sure you show solidarity to those people, because there will be a lot of them facing a major kind of, psychological rift and potentially post-traumatic stress disorder after the abuse that they've received, etc. as well. So, it's in or out of the Labour Party, solidarity is absolutely key to all of this. We will try and wind up on time, so I will thank my guests for absolutely brilliant contributions. The comments have been flying in faster than I can keep up with them. It looks like everybody has been really enjoying the show, and do share this, do watch it on catch up, and get people to watch it on catch up as well, and do keep up with, follow these guys on social media, Rob Sewell and Leah Levain, follow their organizations, and do make sure that you keep up with what Socialist Telly is doing, and we'll do our best to keep you informed and help people take the fight to the people who are trying to destroy a movement that is all about helping people. Thank you again for that, and enjoy the rest of your week, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.